how can I create a job or a profession or a business that really focused not on the historical stuff, which we had to do 90% of the time because that usually was garbage in, garbage out type stuff, but taking that information and really kind of sitting with the business owner and looking forward. And that's when I really found a passion. I enjoyed that. That was fun.
Hey, welcome to 10X Your Team with Cam and Otis. We're a father-son leadership podcast where we talk with other lifelong learners about making an impact and solving big problems. And, one of these days I'll remember the Spanish word for bird because they're
coming through, huh?
Willow or whatever.
The whippoorwill.
Whippoorwill. There we go.
Whippoorwill. There we go. I don't think we got them out here. I see a whole bunch of doves. Just fancy for their pigeon cousins.
Now that you that back from my the very few times that I went dove hunting as a kid growing up in Texas, not probably like 3 or 4. Now that you say that, yep, that's a dove. And
and I got to say the Spanish word, because your granddaughter loves it, is pájaro. Or pajarito if it's a little bird. So there you go. Get what you learned out of the way real quick.
Well, and I'm excited. I'm not excited for my guest yet, but I'm excited for my new hat. Anybody else wearing a new hat today? Oh, wait.
Ooh.
No, nobody else is wearing a new hat today. Look at my new hat.
The pocket litter hats are in.
Pocket litter hat is here. There we go. Look out. Look out. This was the key element that the company was missing for massive scaling. Right there was that.
Those of y'all who are subscribed on YouTube and see all the different whiskey words and stuff, you've seen Otis talk a bunch in the last month or so about business mistakes he made. And it was things like thinking a podcast would bring him business, or the website would all of a sudden just bring all this traffic. And he went through a bunch of stuff like that. You didn't mention hats being a problem, though. I think the hats are a key cornerstone.
Hats are the solution. I mean, right? And our guest, Jody joining us. Jody, I'm guessing just folks, when you watch the video, you'll know why I said this. I'm guessing you're a hat guy when you go outside, ain't
you? Dude, I wear hats all the time.
Smart man. Some folks are given personal reasons to wear a hat. So mine grows. My reason to wear a hat grows daily. So
my reason grew a long time ago, or lack of growing a long time ago.
There you go. Yeah, Jody, man, thanks for joining us. I'm excited because I always like you are the antithesis of the accountant, and. What I'd love for you to walk us through, maybe just tell us how do you go from being an accountant to a CFO? Because that's a whole accountant's all legacy.
Yep.
Lagging. CFO's all future.
Yeah.
How'd you make that, man?
Kind of funny, man, because when I started out in public accounting, and the whole idea was I want to be an accountant. You don't know what you don't know, and then I got into it, and the first thing I did was auditing, and auditing is obviously all past. You're just analyzing information for the past, determine how accurate it is, and I hated it. It was horrible. It was one of those things like, oh my gosh, get me out of this as quick as possible. And so the other alternative 20 plus years ago was tax, and so you had really 2 alternatives at that time, and I thought, well, I'll try that, and it was better, but again, it was not what I wanted to do long term, and so I thought, I got in the wrong profession. Neither one of these is going to work out, and I thought, you know what, maybe the corporate world's a little bit better. Maybe public accounting is not what I'm looking for. Maybe it's that corporate world, and so I went to work for a giant.
Damn, we're naive when we're young.
Oh, we are ridiculously dumb. And I did.
When does that stop, by the way, y'all?
Yeah. And the corporate world was worse because it was like Groundhog Day. It was like from that movie. It was rinse and repeat, and it was just so boring. At first, it was great for about a year, and then after a while, I was like, wow. And so then it was like, what do I do? Here I'm an orphaned accountant. I don't have a job. I have a job, but I don't like what I'm doing. I definitely know it's not long term. And I thought, you know what, I'm going to try this entrepreneurial thing. And so I started my own business. And, with that, I thought, this is going to be great because I'm going to change the way that people think about accounting. I'm going to do things differently, figure it out. And I jumped right back into the old thing that everybody else does. I billed by the hour. I did historical financials. I did tax returns. I did whatever it took to make money. And as we all do when we start a business, I worked a bazillion hours. So I thought, hey, I'm going to get out of public accounting because they work a bazillion hours. I worked probably twice that. And so it was like, but I was, but I was doing it was my own business, right? So we're working really hard. Hired a person right out of college. My very first hire, my first day as an entrepreneur. And so I made $0 for about 2 years. And I actually lived on credit cards. It was the most brutal thing in the world. It was like, oh my gosh, what did I do? I would never advise anybody to start a business on credit cards, but I did, and with that, I thought there's no life preserver because I didn't have a big, trust fund, or I didn't have any money outside of the money that I put into the business. And, with that, I thought, okay, so I'm doing this tax stuff. I'm not liking it, but it's an entrepreneur thing. How do I get out of this rat race? And I thought, well, hey, I'm going to figure out how I can actually set processes in place so that I can actually meet with clients, go through their financial stuff real quick, but kind of really talk about the future. Hey, what can we do talking about, the next 12 weeks, the next, whatever. Because when I was in the corporate world, that's all I did. I did cash management, taxes. And so cash management's looking at, the next 30 days and try to figure out what your cash position is going to be like. And I just assumed that all business owners did that, made the assumption. All business owners look at their cash. They know exactly where they're going. They know how to plan it. And then when I got in and actually spoke with business owners, they had no clue. They had no clue how to do it. They were just rinsing and repeating. They were doing the same thing over and over and hoping that they grew. And miraculously, they pretty much flatlined most of them. Most of them stayed about the same. You probably see this all the time. And so it was one of those things. Well, how could I create a job or a profession or a business that really focused not on the historical stuff, which we had to do 90% of the time because that usually was garbage in, garbage out type stuff, but taking that information and really kind of sitting with the business owner and looking forward. And that's when I really found a passion. I enjoyed that. That was fun. And that's really what a CFO does, right? CFO is looking forward all the time. Accountants look backwards. And so it was one of those things that I kind of tried to figure it out by myself. And at that time, nobody was doing that for small business owners. We were the first. And so it was like, this is kind of cool. But then I had nothing to learn from because I was trying to create it myself and the concept. And it just wasn't well received amongst everybody like it is. It's growing now where it's becoming like a necessity. Everybody does it. But we were like the pioneers for it. And, like you hear the thing, building the airplane in the sky type of thing. That's what we were doing. And that journey was a blast, even though I almost went bankrupt like 10 different times throughout that process. It was a blast. Kind of funny to hear that from a finance guy, right? But
yeah, I know. Well, you've got two finance strikes against you. You use credit cards to get started, and bankruptcy.
Yep, no bankruptcy, but I did use the credit cards.
Almost
many times. And my wife kept on saying, because I was like, when I think of things, it's kind of weird because when I set a goal, I've already hit it. It's one of those things. My mind has already hit that goal. Now I just got to figure out how to get there. And so my wife's the opposite. And so I'd say, hey, honey, we're going to hit that $1 million mark in sales. This year, this is going to be the year. And then 20 things happened and we fell short again. And she'd be like, what happened? I go, well, all these reasons happened. Now the goal is 1.5 million because we're going to do that. And I kept making this. I kept basically visualizing success before it happened on a consistent basis, and it really got me to the point where I grew it from bootstrapped it to about 10 million before I sold it. But in the same process, it was one of those things that I was never happy. As an entrepreneur, I always thought I failed. I was failing forward on a daily basis, and I don't know if you guys ever experienced that before, but failure it was a common thing with an entrepreneur. I kept setting these outlandish goals, and then I would get three quarters of the way there, and I'd feel like I'm a failure, where everybody else would be like, "Hey, you're doing great. Look what you did. This is awesome."
Oh yeah,
yeah.
I joke about it all the time, Jody. Of it's like being a C+ student. Of it's like, hey, everything I'm doing, I'm shooting for that 100%. But god damn, I keep getting 75, keep getting 77.
But you're still growing.
Yeah, it's a tough place to be,
else, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. I mean, that's the example I've used before of like, think about like a to-do list, because I was a crazy to-do list junkie for a while there. Dad, and I was literally, it was like 150, 200 things on the to-do list. I'd get 7,500 things done, Nick. That's way more than most people, but it's not the 200, and that would bother me. I'm with you there. And I think there's an interesting mental piece to the calculated risk and that self-belief. I think as entrepreneurs, we can relate to that self-belief, but there's also this alternative Jody in another universe somewhere where those 10 almost bankruptcies are 10 bankruptcies. And you still have this unshakable belief that you can make an impact, you can do this thing, but for whatever reason, things aren't coming to fruition. That's the spot where usually the money guy goes, hey, this is a bad idea. We need to stop. We need to go get your day job, whatever it is there. Could you do a little like Dr. Heal Thyself on this and look back to you going through that and try to give some advice of what that calculation should look like?
Yeah. No, that's a great point, because there several times throughout that whole process, it really felt that way, where, you think that, hey, I'm at my lowest point, but I've got that horizon ahead there. And I always believed in myself, probably to a fault, that I would never fail. And fail in meaning fail, where I'd have to actually look for another job, because you know what? I hated accounting. I hated what I was doing before. It was like, if I didn't do this, I wasn't successful. What else am I going to do? And so it was one of those things that, my life preserver was, I threw that out a long time ago. It was like, I was either going to sink or swim in this thing, but I knew that if I really tried hard enough, I would. And I think the one guiding light for me was probably my wife. She's an attorney. She started her own practice about the same time. And so she was going through the same struggles, the same beliefs, trying to figure it out. And we were really a good support system. So I think having somebody that's there to really kind of be on your side and understand that, I think was key, because really none of my friends understood it. None of my colleagues understood it. The profession didn't understand it. I'd go to these meetings. I'd say, "Oh, we're going to do this, this, and this," and they'd give me 20 reasons why we weren't going to do that, and how we were going to fail in the process. It was like, you just guys don't understand me. Here's how we're going to get here. I just showed you the path. And they're like, no, you can't do this. You can't do this for 20 different reasons. And it was one of those things I just didn't fall into that belief. And so it was just one of those things I continuously had to kind of self-evaluate. Here's where I'm at. I was super goal-oriented. I always sketched out, hey, here's the next 6 months. Here's the next 12 months. And I didn't wait to the end of the year to do it. 6 months from now, I'm creating the next 12 months, right? And it's a constant over and over. I threw away the calendar a long time ago, and it was just simply that was for taxes and not for really business growth. So I'm looking at 12 months always going forward. And it really wasn't until I started becoming, I'd say, overly profitable that things start clicking. And what I mean by that is, as an entrepreneur, I could do things super quick. I'm really good at putting together forecasts, really good at putting analysis together. I can do it very quickly. And what I thought if I hired you and you, that you could do it the same. And so I would price things out completely wrong, thinking that, hey, it's going to take you an hour. It took me an hour. Why wouldn't it take you an hour? And it took you 3 hours. And it's like, well, what happened there? And then also I'm not profitable. And so it was one of those things I had to kind of learn how to actually be profitable before things really start kicking in. And it took about 7 years really for me to figure the whole process out, to put processes in place, to figure out what my deliverable was to my client, what my brand promise is going to be, all that kind of stuff. And then once I figured it out and I developed cash, that was key, because once I had the cash, it was super easy after that. And because I had the opportunity to take risks that I didn't have before. And although I'm a super big risk taker, as you could probably tell, the fact that I had cash allowed me to accelerate on that risk. The perfect example of that is, just simply diving into the internet. Way back when we started, there was dial-up, and you guys probably the audience probably doesn't know what that is, but dial-up was brutal. And with that, there was this thing called the World Wide Web. We all got into it at the same time. It was like, this is kind of cool. Remember, I didn't have any cash to start things out. So how was I going to market? I thought, you know what, this web thing's kind of cool. I'm going to throw my money and put a web page in there and really start marketing with this thing they called SEO and really kind of figure it out. And it was like, everybody thought I was super crazy. It's like, why are you throwing your money away? The phone book. Remember the phone
This
book?
internet thing will never take off.
Exactly. Internet's not gonna work. The phone book is gold. That's why people spend so much money on it. And I was like, this is great. Well, I started putting my money into this internet thing. And even if you Google me today, virtual CFO, I'm going to pop up on that first page. It's because I was the first one actually doing it. And it turned out a slow going because, again, people weren't picking it up. It wasn't a big thing at first, but after about 5 years, it started really picking up, and that risk started paying off. And I wouldn't have had, if I didn't have the cash to start and to do that, it would have been a great dream, but it wouldn't have been something I could actually put in place. So the cash is the number one thing we tell business owners all the time. Have 10% of your annualized revenue available at all times. If you're $1 million company, you should have $100,000 somewhere where you could tap into it tomorrow. And that's just 10%. If you want to really get risk averse, go up to 30%, and then you're solid. That's a 6 month supply of cash for a service-based company. And so super easy math. And you might think, well, hey, yeah, I'd love to have that kind of money or whatever. No, you really need that kind of money. You need to figure out how to get that, cut back on your own. What you're taking home yourself to build it to that number so that you can take risks, so that, the pandemic doesn't bite you in the butt and put you out of business. You've got availability to really kind of make those, thinking decisions.
There's an interesting, sorry, I guess that I want to jump on. It says there's an interesting piece of the belief there that we were talking about, which is the vision that you were talking about and like reiterating and what you have and what you found as the right thing to build versus that vision that got you to push through all the crap. Could you kind of tell us basically, I guess, how close those two are to each other from point A to point B, and maybe even how many iterations there is in between that? Because I think that's a fundamental aspect of the belief for that entrepreneur is to push through that crap. It's really easy to say this thing is perfect, but it's usually not this thing. It's 10 iterations later of that same core idea. If that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure. When we created the virtual CFO concept back in 2002, so that's a long time ago. The whole idea there was we didn't even really know what a CFO did. I was never a CFO. I had no idea what a CFO did. It was just one of those things. We called it virtual CFO because that's what we actually ranked in when we did our SEO stuff. It's like, oh, that ranks pretty well. Nobody's doing searches for that. Let's call ourselves that. But a lot of folks called themselves outsourced accounting and stuff like that. And I knew that if I couldn't, people, when I did the outsource, when I did the financial meetings where I just meet with you and go over your financials, you never showed up. You showed up maybe 3 out of the 5 meetings, maybe, because we're just talking about historical stuff. They really didn't care about that anymore. That was in the past, which was a kind of a funny concept because that's what accountants pride themselves on, is talking about the past all the time. And I was like, well, that's not going to work. And so I thought, that was the golden ticket. I was going to do this. I was going to create this bundled service for them. And then I thought, one of the clients asked, well, hey, could you just kind of walk through maybe, helping us out over the next, the next month of cash, what that looks like? And it was like, well, yeah, I definitely can do that. Super easy. So I created a spreadsheet back then. I put together the 12-week or basically the weeks in the month there, set the month up, met with the client, walked through that, that process with them. And they're like, wow, this is kind of cool. And it was like, yeah, this is your next cash. And then we'd meet the next month and we go through, hey, here's where you're at. And it just kind of took, you could tell the client was like, wow, this is nice. Now I'm feeling more comfortable with the decisions I'm making. I know I can make these decisions. And it was like, oh, this is kind of interesting. And then it was the concept, well, that's not paying the bread and butter, so they're coming to me for a 12-week or a 13-week cash flow. That's great. And I thought, what would be more important to the client? So I started thinking, how can we make this more valuable? And the value came when we started really asking the client, hey, when are you going to retire? It's like, well, that kind of question is that. We're just doing my accounting. What are you talking about? It's like, well, I'm going to create this forecast to kind of show you how to get there. And they're like, oh, this is kind of neat. And so I did. I created a 3-year forecast, build it out, and they're like, well, you just created, you put numbers in there, and you made it that. You go, how's that? How can I influence that? Then I really started thinking about it. It's like, well, hey, how can we create this concept so that we can create this long-term forecast for this client to show them their end goal, but then make it so that they could actually control it. kind of a weird concept, I guess, or an obvious concept for some people. And I thought, let's break it down to non-financial KPIs. And the analysis I like to tell people is like, it was the first one I did was a trucking company. And what they did is they had over the road trucks. The semis would break down. They'd go pick the semis up and they'd repair them. They'd repair them from scratch. And they'd either do it and charge the owner, or they would actually buy it, refurbish it, then sell it. And I was like, oh, this is kind of interesting. And so we started talking about how many they were bringing through. And let's say they're bringing through 10 semis. And so we're like, hey, if you did 10 semis a month and we're walking through it, what's your average semi cost? Okay, $60,000 rebuild. Great. You got 10 of them. So then we know exactly what kind of revenue you're going to have next month. And then you do that, and more crashes happen in the winter. So unless you're in Colorado at this time of year, and then you go through and you go through and figure it out. And it was breaking out their financial statement without them even thinking about it, with things that they could actually relate to and control. And it was like, oh, this is cool. And so then I would show them, and I'd flip it over on the cash side and say, hey, if you continue doing this, your cash is going to go from $100,000 in the bank to $300,000 in the bank without having to worry about it. And they're like, wow, this is really cool. And it just kind of made sense. And so then every month we'd rinse and repeat. And we'd say, hey, how come you said 10, but you only had 8 come through? Is that going to be the norm? No, that was a one-off. And so it's always one-offs for business owners, just so you know. That was a one-off. And then next month, the same one-off. I'm like, hey, we've had 3 one-offs in a row. Let's go ahead and reduce our forecast and say, instead of 10 and building it over, let's build it with 8. And let's see where that ends up. But we don't have 300,000 in cash. We have 250. Okay, that's cool. We're good. High five. And then we move on. And so I started really figuring out how we can actually do this on a repeatable basis. Because again, I always thought people, like I said, I always thought people would do it as fast as I could. But I always thought they'd be able to deliver that same concept. And Camden, I was wrong completely, because I started really kind of figuring this out. And I was the best CFO in the world for like 10 companies, and this was great. I was really building this thing, and I thought, well, this is going to be easy to scale, and it wasn't. So I ran into another roadblock. It's like, well, what's going on here? I hired my first CFO. He was a true CFO. He actually worked at a beer distributing company, and I thought, well, he knows what he's doing. I'm going to throw him in there, and he's going to just nail it out of the park like I did, because my business partner was doing it well. I was doing it well. Of course, he's going to do it well. And he had no clue how to be in there in front of a client and actually do this. And I was like, geez, you do this? You did this for a living for a company? It's like, yeah, but that's all I had one company. I had one product. How do you figure this out? How do you do all this? And so that's when I had to create processes around our deliverable. It's like, I had to create, how much cash do they need? I already mentioned that. How much, what the forecasting model should look like, what profit should look like, and then what's the sales outlook, to kind of make everything, circle around there. So I had to kind of figure that out, teach him a process so that when he went to the meetings, he had something he can actually talk about. And so we started naming meetings. We started naming it a forecasting meeting, a sales outlook meeting, a financial statement meeting, so that the right people were there. Because again, he'd go to the meetings, and let's say the owner didn't want to be there on the sales outlook one. He wanted the revenue guy to be there, the invoicing guy, whatever. And so then that person would be invited to the meeting. Maybe on the forecasting meeting, we get so in detail about payroll that he didn't want anybody in there. Maybe he was just himself, or maybe he didn't care, he wanted everybody in there. We had to figure that type of process out. And so it was a continuous, repeatable process. And like you said, we would fail, trying to figure it out, because so if we did all this and he's doing it, how long is it going to take him to do it? We're trying to figure out what's a client going to pay for it, and we are always wrong with that. We always thought clients will never pay for this, and that was a big fault we had for about 7 years. Because we were it was the funny part about it was like staring me in the face, and I just never figured it out. We were closing about 90% of every opportunity we got. It was like, people love this. Problem is, we were closing every 90% because it was undervalued. And so I thought, hey, I'm just going to increase the price. We're just getting too many clients. I can't, and we're not profitable. I can't continue this process. And so we started increasing our price. And every time we did that, my Adam, my partner, he's like, oh, we're going to lose all of our clients. We're not going to pick up any clients. And I was like, oh, we will. We will. And, I did it. My sales closing ratio kept going down and down and down until we got to about 30%. I loved it. We're picking up great clients. Now we became profitable, and we start building cash. And so it was amazing all these different, risks and the thoughts that, to answer your question, the thoughts that were going kind of through our head. How can we change the process to make it better, to figure it out, and not give up anywhere in the process? Because again, when hiring our first CFO, that could have been our last CFO if we'd have done it wrong. And it was one of those things that it was like I didn't want to do that, and I didn't want it to be a 2-person shop either. I didn't want it to be the Adam and Jody show. I didn't want that to happen either. I called it Summit CPA Group initially because I wanted it to be bigger than what we were, even though I was the only person that was there. It was I had to make sure that I could actually call it a group, which was kind of funny. But I was looking again the future. I was planning on, hey, we're going to be big, and that happened, and it just continued to grow. And then it was just those calculated risks that you took along the way. We did the subscription-based billing model because I was tired of living on credit cards. And so I thought, hey, I can't be the bank for everybody else. And so how are we going to figure that out? Because I'm going to go out of business if I'm waiting for everybody to send me a check. And so I thought, hey, what if I just zap their account every month? What would they think? And so I asked all the clients, they're like, yeah, that's cool. You mean we don't have to actually write a check? I'm like, nope.
Yeah, I don't have to go back and write the check and make sure
that's exactly
right.
We'll just take it out of your account every month, first day of the month. They're like, oh, perfect. And then for every new client we picked up, that's what we say. Hey, that's how we do things. We don't send invoice. We just zap your account. So we figured that out, and I was like, oh, this is great. Then I'm thinking, why are we doing it monthly? Why not do it weekly? And I thought people have no problem with this, right? My partner's like, we're going to lose everybody, Jody, if you do it weekly. And it's like, no, we're going to do it. And so every new client that we picked up, that was the deal. It was $1,500 a week or whatever the dollar amount per week was. And they're like, no problem. Didn't affect anything. No one ever even questioned it. It was like, well, this is easy. And so then it was like, wow, this is great. And so I built that $10 million practice without having any AR, which was pretty freaking awesome. And with that, you can imagine my favorite day of the week was Mondays. That's the way to take the withdrawal. But that was one of those things that like you mentioned, it was another thing hit me in the face. I can't afford to do this. I can't afford to be on a call talking about cash with a client and then having our bills sitting right in front of them. And how easy it is for me to say, hey, don't worry about us. You can pay us next week because that was not a good thing. And then when clients didn't show up because they owed us money, that was bad too. So it was, how do I figure all this out? And I thought, the subscription-based billing model is something I basically created. And, with it was like, this is kind of cool. And it worked out really well. It worked out so well that I actually got reported to the AICPA, the accounting, for pulling people's money out of their accounts because they never, without sending them a bill. And that didn't last very long. That got squashed pretty quickly. But another CPA firm turned us in for that. I was like, this is kind of different. So
that's one of those old things, like how because we had somebody on one of our first 100 episodes talking about this same kind of thing, but from a payment perspective of paying your employees, and they were like, well, yeah, because it used to be actual paperwork, but now it's not. Like, why the hell do I have to jump through these hoops for it?
Yeah. Well, why do I have to send an invoice out? I mean, what's that? I mean, they know the dollar amount. Netflix doesn't do that, and Netflix
exactly.
It's like, why would I do it if Netflix doesn't do it? And so that was that was just another hurdle. So it was all these hurdles that are popped up there, one after another, not having cash, trying to figure out what people want to buy and how to actually scale it. And then it became, we were the first firm to ever go remote. According to Forbes magazine, we were like one of the first 125 companies in the world. And, with that was only because I couldn't figure out how to scale locally. We're from Fort Wayne, Indiana, a population of about 300,000 people. And, it was one of those things. So how do I get more CFOs? Am I going to just poach all these CPA firms to get them? Do I get them right out of college and grow them up? How fast, all that kind of stuff. And it was like, well, what if I just tapped into the world, tapped into the nation? And, with that, a client that was fully remote, one of the first fully remote companies ever, they had 60 people all across the world. And I thought, well, this is kind of a cool concept. I wonder if I could actually do this here. And again, I was told not to do it. Even my team was like, hey, we can't work remotely. And it's like, well, guys, you're working with clients remotely. Why can't you work remotely? And it's like, well, I don't know, because all these different reasons. And, it was one of those things that just continued on the reasons. And then, then I had a meeting. I'm like, guys, here's what we're going to do the remote thing. And it was like, I thought I was going to have a mutiny. I really did. they're even my partner's like, Jody, I got 5 kids at home. He doesn't have 5, he has 4, but it feels like 5. 5 kids at home, and it's like, what am I going to do? I can't, there's no way that I'll be able to do that. And so I thought, hey, I'm going to make a really cool. I'm not going to do this remote thing. It was a great idea. Failure upon concept there. I'm going to just create this really cool office that everybody wants to come to. And so I took my office building, which was square feet, but I just gutted it completely. And then I put these really cool offices in. I put this really cool saltwater fish tank at the front. I had like
of course
all the offices.
Did you have a ping pong table and a kegerator?
No kegerator, but the ping pong. And it was kind of funny.
That's a running joke here at Traven Purpose.
Oh, is that right?
That's where culture comes from, Jody. Don't you know?
I know. It took about 8 weeks before I got everything done with the rebuild. And one by one, everybody's like, hey, this thing is kind of working from home is kind of cool. And one after the other, the entire 18 people at the time decided, hey, I'd like to work remote. I'm like, no problem. So $100,000 to build an office that nobody ever stood foot in, which was a kind of a bummer, but it actually was a good thing. But just like that, hey, how do we figure out how to scale? Do we just continue to hit ourselves in the face and try the things that everybody did? No, let's figure something outside of the box. Let's figure out how to get people in Denver, Colorado, which is that kind of funny. It's my first hire. My second CFO is from Colorado Springs, Colorado. And I thought, if he's from Colorado Springs, he could never come to my office. That's going to work perfect. And so I need to actually hire all these people all across the United States. Again, I take the lifeboat and just like getting rid of it. I was hiring everybody. And so I was like, well, if we're going to fail, there's just no way that we're going to bring everybody back in here in this office. And so it was just one thing after another. I said that common belief that, hey, things are just not going to, we're going to figure it out. And we did. It's just kind of funny when you're up against the wall like that, all the different ideas that might come into your head to figure it out. And that's basically that's a long answer to your short question, Cam.
Well, I want to jump back because I'd love to hear kind of the origin of the I believe I can do it. Because self-doubt is a survival thing. I don't know if I can climb up that cliff. Well, that's probably a good decision, not to climb up that cliff, unless you're what's that guy, Dean Potter, or one of those nutcases.
Is that the free solo guy?
Yeah, no, Alex Hanold is the free solo guy.
I'd believe you whichever answer you said.
I'll admit there's a great documentary series that's out on HBO right now called the Dark Wizard. That's about Dean Potter.
Really?
Alex Honnold. And yes, Alex is the one who free soloed, much to Dean Potter's chagrin. Mm-hmm. But back to the accountant who believes he can do it. Where the hell? Did you used to free solo? Is that where it came from? You a free solo accountant?
Yeah, you caught him.
Yeah, it's kind of funny because accountants hate risk, and so I'm definitely not in the accountant model. And every test that I take says I'm not an accountant, and it's pretty obvious. I was actually.
Do you keep taking them to try and prove yourself?
I keep taking them. Say, hey, did it change at all? No, it hasn't changed. Actually, I got fired in public accounting. I forgot to mention, and the managing partner said, Jody, you're just not made out for public accounting. Your personality is definitely not there. And I was like, well, that's great. your first job and you get fired from because they say you're not made out for the profession that you went to school with. And so that's why I went into the corporate world. But with that, it was just a belief that I've always had. I wrestled in high school, and my first couple of years, I didn't win a match at all. I actually won one match. But I wrestled some really good people, and one of them was like one of the state champions. And even though I had not won a match my freshman and sophomore year, I thought I was going to beat the kid. I'm like, I'm going to beat him. Here's how I'm going to do it. I'm going to figure it out. I'm all psyched up. I get out there. I start wrestling. I get my ass killed. It's like, wow, that was quick. And, with that, it was kind of funny because it was just one of those things that I just believed. And then, but I think that belief really kind of hurt me a lot along the way because That's probably why I lost a lot of the matches, because I didn't believe. It's like
Hmm.
I thought I believed, but I didn't truly believe I could actually win a match. And it wasn't until between my sophomore and junior year in high school, so this goes back a long way, that I went to a camp up in Minnesota, and with a bunch of people from the team. It was a great camp. And I wrestled these people, had no idea who they were. And ironically, I'm talking to him afterwards. I'm like, yeah, here I had not won any matches, right? Oh, how'd you do? Because I beat this one kid. And he's like, oh, hey, how did you do last year in state? I'm like, state? No, no, you don't understand. Why? How did you do? He goes, oh, I got like fourth in state in Iowa. I'm like, wow. And it was amazing because, the things that you talk yourself out of, oh, if I'd have known he placed fourth in state, I would never, ever have beaten him, just based on what I told you there. Never. But then once that happened, it was like, wow, it's all in your mind, really. And with that, it just continued on. That whole next year, I went almost undefeated. I lost like 3 or 4 matches. The very next year, same thing. Got beat by the same guy 4 times, which really kind of bummed me out. But anyways, that was my 4 out of my 5 losses my senior year. But that whole thing, it just kind of comes back to that belief that if you believe you can't do it, like you said, you're not going to. But if you believe you can, you've got a good shot at it. So it was one of those things that I always thought you could. And once I figured that out, that's what happened in life. I sold knives right out of high school. Just try to figure out how to, to kind
You were the Cutco.
Yeah,
Cutco. I've got one. It's a good knife.
I've got them too. Believe it or not.
That's why they can still do it, despite how much we joke about them and talk shit.
I sold Cutco for 4 years. Right out and I did really well. I was one of the top sales reps in the nation. I think I ran a branch in Iowa, and I was number 4 in the nation out of over 100 branches as an 18-year-old. And it was like, oh, this is kind of cool. Because I figured it out. I didn't care how old you were. It didn't make any difference. I figured that out before. That's the reason I was getting beat up by all these juniors and seniors and sophomores in high school, because I was a freshman. Freshmen can't beat seniors up. Well, that's unrealistic, and that's not real.
Yep.
And once I got over that, I thought, hey, 18, I can do this. Why not? And I did really well with it. And then it continued on to where, I always thought, hey, I can figure this out. I'm not going to take a calculated risk where I'm going to jump off a cliff. I'm not going to do that. But that's the calculated risk. I'm not going to do that. But it just came from when I was young, and it just continued on throughout the whole process. But I truly believe you're going to be right, whether you believe it or not. So whether you believe you can do it or not, you're 100% right. That's the key, because once you have that doubt, you won't do it.
I think that's huge, and I think there's another layer that I want to add. I want to get your perspective on it, actually, Dex. I think it ties into a lot of the Green Beret stuff. But it's like this, like you said, whether you believe you can or you can't, you're right. Mm-hmm. I think there's a layer on top of it where a lot of people have this belief that they can do something, that they will get something, but they don't have a belief in like the how is the layer I would add to it. That there's a little bit of a layer of thinking about it deep enough of like, hey, am I going to beat this kid? Yeah, I'm going to beat him. I'll beat him. It's like, no, but here's how I'm going to beat him.
Right.
Yeah, he's bigger, but I can do this. So like, and just adding that extra layer, I think, gives you so much to fuel that belief. And that the reason I wanted to throw it to you is because to me that speaks a lot to like what you talk about with Green Berets and like the thriving and the chaos. Is it's not scripting these things. You clearly don't know, but you still can find that way. How could you talk a little on that?
Yeah, the how is the key, and I think the success I had a lot to do with my business partner, Adam Hale. He was kind of the executor of my vision. So I would have the vision. I would say, hey, here's what we're going to do. We're going to do X amount. Here's how we're going to sell. Here's how we're going to do all this kind of stuff. And then he would execute upon it, which was huge, because I think if I look at my blind spot, my blind spot's probably that follow through. When you look at it, because follow through is really key. And so I knew right away that that's a blind spot. So I got to find somebody that could overcome that blind spot and fit in that role. And he was perfect for it. He wasn't the visionary, at that time. Now he's kind of leaning into being a visionary, being around me for 20 plus years. But with that, the execution part was huge. And so I would say, if you inherently have that, God bless, that's awesome. But I didn't, I could get there. I wouldn't say I didn't. It was just really hard for me to get there and continue on, but when I brought somebody alongside me that could do it, could execute on it exactly, that's when we as a team could really get over hurdles, and really get there a lot faster. So I would say if the inherent part's not there, you really need to find that number one person that can help you get there.
Yeah, definitely finding your weak spot on that, and yeah, the belief in the how, or the one who can fill in the gaps.
Yeah.
Yeah, who was? I think it's I can't remember what he calls it. I know it was a Tony Robbins thing, but the visionary and then the doer, and how that can really solidify the business. How did you? Was it just one of those? Y'all were nerding out on numbers, or commiserating on numbers. I mean, because I've known quite a few entrepreneurs who've gone on the search for the ideal partner, and that never, I shouldn't say never, but it rarely works out that way. So how did y'all?
I'm 0 for 4. Actually, no, one for 5. I'll count you as a success story, Dad, if I can count you as one. Even though I joined you late, so I don't know if I count as a partner there. But
you're gonna kind of laugh, but he was my first hire out of college, my very first hire. And I sat down with him and I said, hey, read this book. It's called E-Myth Revisited. Love the book. I read it many, many times. I go, read this book, because this is how we're going to create this, this new company, this new idea. This is how we're going to change the way that people think about accounting is through this. And he read it and he was like, I don't know if I want to join you. I'm like, well, why not? And I'm like, because it sounds like I'm going to be doing all the work and you're going to be doing nothing. And I go, no, reread it, because that's not what it's saying. It's saying we got to develop processes for everything and put in place. And when he understood that, and I started seeing that happen, I realized pretty quickly this guy's I got to keep this guy no matter what. This guy's pretty solid. And then once I got to the point where I thought, hey, let's make him a partner, which is only 7 years into the deal. We weren't even at probably $500,000 in revenue at that time, and so we were pretty small. And I'm like, hey, we're gonna create this vision. I need you to be on this. We really kind of focused on it, and then we butted heads. About probably 3 years into it, and because his idea was, hey, I've got all these friends out here that are making a lot of money, $300,000 a year, and here's what they're doing. They're buying all these cool boats, and we aren't even making 100,000 each. We're struggling trying to build this machine. And I'm like, you gotta believe in me. You got to figure this out. And so we went through counseling together. Really, we brought a business coach in, helped us through the situation. Got us right on the right path to where he started separating duties, because he wanted to do a lot of things I was doing, and I was doing everything, because of course, I'm the entrepreneur. Entrepreneurs always do everything, right? And so I was doing everything, and we had to start putting ourselves into lanes. And then once we did that, and he focused, and he was on the right lane, and I was in the right lane, it just really continued on. So I would say I got super lucky at the very beginning, but I understood, hey, once I had that, I couldn't let this guy go. I had to figure out how to actually get him to believe the way I wanted him to believe, and kind of go into that same route, stay in the same lanes, to where he can do really well at what he does. I could do really well what I do, and then together we can do even better. And that's really what happened. It was kind of luck from the beginning, but once we gelled there a little bit, it became more than that. Just had to recognize the opportunity when it happened.
It's interesting, the way you talked earlier about how in all these different ways you're not that much like the accountant. I want to ask just quickly, do you think that's a litmus test for whether you should be an accountant versus a CFO? Like, is that kind of the split there? Like, I've gotten this comment before, like, Dad, you always say, like, I'm an economics guy. Econ people look at me and they go, oh, that's behavioral economics guy, because he doesn't like the numbers. Like, it's a clear split over to this other direction. Is that the split there, Jody?
It is 100%, because we'll hire accountants all day long, because we're an accounting firm, right? And it's like they all think that, hey, the path is, hey, be an accountant, then go up the ladder, then eventually be a CFO. It's like, no, that's not how this works. You might end up at a controller level, which is, again, talking about the past, but you've got to have that special, that special interest in going forward. And so we go through a lot of testing to make sure that, hey, this person is really going to be in the comfort zone when they're going through and they're talking the future. Because again, That is super tough for an accountant to do, is talk the future. They can talk the past and explain the past away, which is great. You need that person, but the future is really what the forecast. So yeah, the litmus test is simple. Do they have, are they bored being an accountant? Do they want to kind of, if I put you in front of a client, are you going to fall back and talk about the past because you're super comfortable with it when I'm not around, or are you going to actually continue talking about the future? And that's kind of that's kind of what we look for when we hire these CFOs.
What do you think that is? Do you think it's a risk thing? Their fear of getting it wrong, because it reminds me of my time in the Army, and we have these guys, military intelligence guys. Yes, it's always a joke. But I would always push them to predict. It's a very similar thing, and they would because they'd always been trained much like an accountant of, well, this is what's happened. So it seems like a similar thing. Yeah. They were afraid of getting it wrong and getting in trouble. Is that
I mean, and you hear that all the time. You go into a client, well, what am I going to tell them? I go, what do you mean? What are you going to tell the business owner? You talk to the business owner, try to figure it out, talk with them, go through and it's like, well, but what if I tell them the wrong thing? And I was just actually I'm part of the CAS advisory board, which is the governing body for basically what we do and for the accounting profession. We're sitting amongst everybody, and they're like, hey, when paying bills, do you guys push the button or do you have the client push the button? And I go, what do you mean? I go, well, if we push the button, then we take the liability and the risk for it. If the client does it, then we don't. I go, well, if we push the button and we shouldn't have pushed the button, then it is our fault. But we of course you take the risk for that. I'm like, well, that's not what we do. And it's like, well, that's how we do it. We're going to give the client advice. We're not going to run the client's business for them, but we're going to sit there and they're going to ask us, hey, what do you think? I'm not just going to sit back there and say, hey, go ask 3 people and see what they think and come back to me. I'm going to give them my thoughts. Hey, based on experience, here's what I think you should do. Going forward, what do you think? Have that conversation and then let the client make the ultimate decision, but give the client the information to make that decision. And you're right, they are afraid to do that because they think if they give the wrong recommendations, that the client's going to come back and sue them, or they're going to be at fault for it or whatever. And it's like, well, you've got to, that's just me and you talking. That's part of your job. You've got to be that person that can give that help the client make that informed decision, whether it's right or wrong. That's just how that works. And I'm not right all the time. There's been times where I was 100% convinced the client's doing the wrong thing. The client did it, but you know what? I'm on that client's side right now, and we're all rolling together with it. I'm not holding it against him or anything. And the same thing goes with me. So it's the fact that a lot of accountants are afraid to take the risk, whereas a true CFO is going to help guide that ship. Where an accountant's going to show you, hey, here's where you've been, and here's what the map looked like from behind.
Yeah, no Monday morning quarterback there. It's not helping with stuff. No dragging your feet. Just get by whatever we decide. Go forward, push with it. Everyone push in the same direction. Something's wrong. Hey, we could talk about it. We could change directions. 100%. But you're spot on with that, Jody. The one other thing I wanted to ask you before we wrapped up here is, there's this a concept is not the right word, but whatever. I'm going to get stuck trying to find the right word. There's a concept around business owners being unaware of financial problems, and that to the same kind of extent that you are serving this market, you're doing that because people are unaware of either what's going on previously, how to project, all these different variables there. I think it's kind of unfair to say that they are like truly unaware. I think it's a little bit more realistic to say that they might not have the most accurate picture. They might not spend enough time on it. Could you paint, and through all the different examples maybe you've seen, but because I'm sure there's a wide array of what happens in businesses, but like, what is the reason or the reasons why businesses tend to struggle so much in this financial area and need you to come in and help it with this?
It's really simple, and you kind of laugh when you hear about it, but business owners typically look at their financials when there's an issue.
Taxes.
Yeah, taxes is an issue. Hey, what's going on? There's not enough cash in the bank. the key to successful financial management is looking at them on a regular basis. And so we work with clients, we work with them on a weekly basis, sometimes every other week, but it's very consistent. And that's the key. The consistency is the key, because you're continually building on what you did yesterday, what you did the day before, and you're building towards that goal. If you just go right to the fact that, hey, I'm only going to care about my finances if things aren't going well because I do everything right, and then you don't, well, then you're in a big, what. And so, that's the key. It's just simply looking at things on a very consistent basis. And so I'd say the biggest thing that a CFO, a business coach, anything like that's going to give you is that consistency, hey, and holding you accountable for what you just did, consistency and holding you accountable going forward. And it's no different. I kind of like I guess a map analogy would be the perfect example. So let's assume that I live in Colorado. Okay, where some people that are pretty cool live in Colorado, I guess. And so with that, those cool people, they want to come and visit me in Florida. So you live in Colorado, I live in Florida. I come out to Colorado. I'm like, hey, let's go to Florida. And so let's hop in the car and we just start driving east, because we know Florida is somewhere in the east. And so we're driving east and we get to New York. We're like, oh, wrong. So we make that left turn because we know it's down south. So we follow the ocean. We finally get down there and we're finally get to the Fort Lauderdale where I live. And it's like, well, that's one way of doing it. And that's what business owners do. That's a typical business owner right there. They're continuing on, and eventually they get there, because they're going to get there eventually. They just takes a long time. When you have a CFO that's working with you on a regular basis, I look at that as the GPS. So they're the GPS now. They're not the map. They're the GPS. They're guiding you to that. Your finances and everything else, the map. And with that, they're going to say, hey, you got a roadblock up here. You got to turn right, and let's go around the roadblock. Slow traffic. Let's avoid that. Let's go on the interstate and pay a little bit more there and get some toll. We'll pay the tolls, but we're going to get there an hour faster. And then we get there and we go directly to Fort Lauderdale. That's really the difference there. And so the business owner is always looking. They're just looking things when they hit the ocean. When they got to New York, they're not looking on all the way there, trying to get there in the fastest. The best way of getting there. I think that's the best way of giving that analogy, is just kind of looking at the map and the guidance that CFO would give you.
Yeah, I love that. Love that analogy. And the thought process that goes with it. Anytime we talk about navigation, it always gets me. It's like, yeah. Spent a lot of time with a compass in my hand. That's probably why.
Oh,
yeah. Well, for me, I mean, that other than that analogy, but man, I think it's what I learned is just how important the business partner can be. Having that person, whether they're a partner or your first hire or somebody that's really good at the things you suck at, and boy, that makes a big difference for your business going forward. So, Camden, how about you? What'd you learn?
For me, and actually, I think we kind of brushed over this really quick. But Jody, at one point earlier in the episode, you said really quickly that it was important to have non-financial KPIs for these things, and we moved past that really quick. But I think that is such a key little nugget, because we don't need to get caught up into numbers when my KPIs are numbers, or financials. I'm going to start falling into the financial spiral, and I'm going to start thinking about sales and all these other kind of things. It's like, I need to be thinking about one thing I'm trying to hit, and having that simple thing that not be financial with that, I think is a really good way of keeping the team on track.
Yeah,
Jody, how
thought
about
that
you?
I got was kind of around the questions on, how do you do it? So there's a lot of self-reflection there. The self-reflection, I guess, it always comes back to, whether you can or can't. You're right 100% of the time. And I think that was a huge driving force. But the other thing I would say is the more cash that you have in the bank, the more cash that you have as your safety net, the more risk that you can take and screw up. Because entrepreneurs screw up all the time. And so the idea is, hey, how can I mitigate my risk? And so cash is really a big solid key. Again, the simple thing is 10% of annualized revenue. If you're a service-based company, if you have inventory, it's about 12.5%, 15%. So it's real easy to calculate in your head. You can go through the formulas if you want to. It comes out to about the same thing. But that's, I guess that's my easy takeaway.
Awesome. Jody, how do folks find you, learn more about the virtual CFO?
Well, I'm from Indiana, as you probably, Kurt Signetti, one of the most famous coaches in the world in football right now. He said you can Google me. Well, you can truly Google me. If you Google me, I'll pop up all over the place. I've got YouTube. I'm on YouTube. We give everything away, so it's just basically a lot of information out there. If you want to reach out directly to me, you can just feel free to email me, and that's J Grunden, Grunden at anderscpa.com, and I'd be happy to return an email.
Awesome. Jody, great having you here today. We really appreciate your time.
Thanks, Otis. Thanks, Cam.
Cam, run us out.
All right. Thank you all for listening to today's episode of 10X Your Team with Cam and Otis. And a special thanks to our guest, Jody Grunden, for joining us today. Remember, you can watch full episodes of the show on YouTube at 10X Your Team. And if you enjoyed today's episode, please make sure to pass it along to other lifelong learners in your tribe so that they can enjoy it too. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. As always, that full archive episode is available at www.10xyourteam.net. Thanks again, and we'll see you all next time.